Growth Pod is brought to you by Genero, a leading growth agency in the Nordics. We interview marketing experts, business leaders, and entrepreneurs to uncover the stories and strategies behind profitable growth.
Today's guest is Tuva Palm, a seasoned and well-known tech executive, investor, and board member. Tuva has held senior leadership roles at companies like Klarna, Oracle, and Nordnet, where she was the CPO and CTO, so Chief Product Officer and Chief Technology Officer. Welcome to the show, Tuva.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
I'd be curious to know, because you started studying computer science, I think it was in 1998. So it was before the dot-com, before it was cool, I guess, before it was that big of a field.
Yeah, I guess you could say that it was before dot-com, but the dot-com had actually kind of started somewhat, but in some, and my family, we were early adopters on all kinds of technology. We were the first family where we lived to have, a video recording machine, all these new technologies in the 80s and 90s. We were kind of first with that. So we had a computer already in the 80s. One of this, it was just a keyboard, and the computer was in the keyboard, and you connected it to the TV, and you could play like Pac-Man or whatever it was. So it had kind of started a little bit, and you could sense that it was something cool coming. The web started 1990. It started earlier, but with a new kind of browser. The Mozilla browser started, I think it was in 94. Netscape or something similar was in 96. So it had kind of started. And I think even the Swedish Prime Minister, Carl Bildt, had sent an email to the American president. And that was a big thing in Sweden. So it was kind of early, but it's still, you could feel that this is something coming.
Did you already then have this kind of this vision or this idea that you were going to learn these kind of technologies and then use them for business? Or were you just focused on technology?
Yeah, I was focused on technology. The funny thing is that I actually started my studies. Before I started my studies, I was super into physics. And I wanted to solve the problems with fusion and do researching. And be a scientist because I had a lot of relatives doing that who were in that field, and they were working in CERN in Switzerland, for example. So that was my idea. But then when I was sitting with, at that point in time, you didn't go into the web, obviously, and applied for going to the university. You got these catalogs, physical paper catalogs that you were looking into. So then I was looking into I was going to apply for the Swedish name translated is technical physics. I don't know the correct English term for it, but and then I looked at it and I felt like, it seems a bit heavy though. Maybe I should go for computer science, because we had a computer at home. No one else had it. And we had it for a couple of years, and Macintosh, it was really, really cool. We even had internet, actually, my family. So, and then kind of spontaneously, I think it was just a few weeks before you were going to send in this, I applied for computer science. And actually, I started to do, and I wanted to take a PhD, and I wrote one paper. I did some research on how to utilize the memory in a processor, in a CPU, in the best way to get as much performance as possible. And this was, at this point in time, performance was everything, because, the machines were very slow. So that was a kind of a hot topic at the time. So I started, and I wrote a paper. I did the research and wrote a paper and got the paper signed in like 3 months. It was like, the professor at the Royal Institute of Technology that was kind of working with us, he was really impressed. But it was way too, it wasn't really my thing. So instead, I started to work at a startup called Appeal Virtual Machines, which made a compiler for the newly released Java programming language. It was really, the Java programming language is one of, I think it's the most used programming language today. I would assume, I don't know, but I would assume it's one of the most common programming language, but that was new at that time. And that they headhunted me, and it was, also, it wasn't research, but it was very deep tech. So it wasn't until a few years into my career where I went into making that, turning the tech into business. And I think actually it happened because we were acquired by an American company, and, everyone was so focused on making this cool technology, and our American managers, they were kind of business focused, and they were like, hello, are you thinking about, we need to generate some revenue out of this? And I listened to them, and then I felt like, hold on, we need to focus on this, guys. And then I started to have what's called product management now. We call it something else at the time, but basically making sure that the things we built actually had such value for customers so that they were willing to pay for it. So that's how it started.
And you've spent your career, I think, focused really a lot on product management and product strategy. What would you kind of identify as the key skills that you have that make you really successful at that? Like what does it take to identify the kind of products and prioritize what should be built?
I think it's the understanding of reading other persons, understanding other person's needs. And that is something that, I've always had it, I guess. But it's something that, for example, when I started off as a product manager, although we call it something else, then we had been acquired by an American company. So this was an American organization. And I was very much, at the time, there were no books about product management at this point in time. It was, the only books that were out there were about, cool technology, and about, it was no books about making the products, building technology that people really wanted. So basically we had to invent that. And if you compared me to my peers, I think I was the youngest one. I was at least 10 years younger than the others. I was the only female, if that makes sense. But, I was a little bit underdog. And I was also the only Swede. All the other ones were American, and they lived in Silicon Valley, and I was working remote. But the difference was that they told everyone how their product worked. And they said that, we have built this for experts. So they were a bit, cocky, like, if you, read the fucking manual, a little bit. Whereas I identified a few design customers, and I got a relation with them. First I had 20, and then I realized it's too many. So then I realized that 5, 6 is about, if I had them in different niches, and if I called them up and asked them, or even travel them, visit their sites and so forth, then I could get an understanding what they really needed. So I think that in the beginning, it was more that I was asking, collecting information, compiling it, and deciding based on the information, taking a decision. And this is, you can't solve all problems, but you need to see that for these 5, 6 customers, and also as I understood the technology, I knew this is something that takes a lot of time to develop. So it's a high cost of developing this feature, whereas this feature, it's an easy fix. And, these 5 customers want this fix. We could, so I could find like the low-hanging fruits and I think that was, and now you could read books about how to do that. But I think that was really the key success factor at the time.
And so now that, you have this broad experience, deep long and broad experience of product management. How do you kind of apply that when you're thinking about potential companies to invest in, or in your board role as a board member? Like, do you have any frameworks or checklists when you're evaluating a company's product or product strategy?
I don't have a checklist per se. When I invest in a company, I used to say that I look at three things. I look at the team, of course. I look at the problem. You know, how big is the problem they aim to solve? I mean, is it a problem that everyone has? Is it a problem that a few people have? And then I look at the solution that the company are providing. You know, is the solution that the company providing, is that really solving the problem? Then it could be, you know, so that's what I'm looking at. And that is a bit of the product management, you know, mapping problems and solutions. So that's what I look at. And then, I mean, also when I'm, for example, in a board, you know, it's back in the days, we started off, I mean, one of the key factors in my career early on was that we discussed a lot with customers and we tested a lot with customers. However, these days, you know, young product managers, they read books and they say you should test, and they test everything. And so it kind of has gone to an absurdum, and giving, you know, you need to test a few things, of course, and you need to be adaptive to how the customer responds to what you have. But it's also a handicraft. You know, I've been a product manager, I've been working with product management for 25 years. So a few things I know that this won't work and this will work. And I can't really say why. So I know when I was in one board, they presented a product they were going to do a testing of it. And I said, this won't work. And the CEO said, how do you know that? I said, I just know it. It won't work because it won't fit your customer's behavior. And he said, but we have a lot of data, blah, blah. And then it didn't work. And then he came back and he asked me, how did you know that? And I was like, I don't know. I've just done it so many times, so I couldn't really see how this would fit.
I think that's I think the last point is really interesting, because that's something that I've seen as well, where testing can become like a crutch. You don't really know, you don't have conviction, so let's just test everything. But how do you develop, you know, without having, like, let's say, decades of experience? Is there a way that someone can develop that kind of judgment and feel
of course
sooner?
Yes, of course. And then yes, definitely. I mean, it's it's also, I mean, some people have it, others haven't. I mean, it's also a talent. But also, I mean, I had, for example, I recruited a few of the best product managers from customer service, because they had been sitting there talking hours and got, you know, they understood the customer's problem. They had gotten a deep dive. So that could be, so you could also educate yourself, even if, and I used to say to my product managers that go down to customer service, or go up, depending on where you're sitting in the building. We had it one floor below. Go down and sit there for 1 hour a week or whatever, to just hear what's being said. But then, I mean, to build something, you also need to do this testing. That's a good way to make modifications. But if you're going to build something grand, a large, you know, then you need to have a vision on your own. You need to be, I mean, the most traditional example, and I know everyone's taking that example, but that's Steve Jobs and the iPhone. If you would have asked the customers, what do you need? They would have said longer battery time, you know, battery times. And that, you know, instead he built a phone with, you know, that you needed to have the charger in your purse, because, you know, the battery was really crappy on the first versions. It didn't even last a day. And still, that was the phone that everyone left their other phones for. So, I mean, that shows also that you need to have a vision for if you're doing something grand also. But I think that the main challenge and the main opportunity is if you understand the customer, kind of the customer journey. When is the customer using this product? And what's the customer doing when? So I'm sitting in the board of Easy Park, for example. when are you taking up your phone and open the Eastpark app? Well, it's when you're sitting at you're sitting in your car and you're about to do the parking. You don't sit at home and do the parking. You sit in the car, and then you can evolve the product regarding, where are the customer, what are they doing, what other problems are they doing, and also I used to say, for example, one mind challenge or whatever you call it is to have the product manager evaluate what are the customers doing if they're not using the product, what are the alternative actions, or what are the alternative, instead of using our product, what are they doing instead? And then, for example, for Nordnet, we identified that the product, our customers, they weren't using another, our customers, basically the main customer, they were trading stocks on the stock market. So they were not trading stock through another vendor. They were, the majority, I mean, we did some testing, they were instead watching Netflix or playing computer games or doing gaming or betting. So we were competing with entertainment. And that was kind of, that kind of helped us build the product.
That's really interesting, because that would not have been obvious to me.
No.
You're not competing with other.
Yeah.
So essentially, it's like, before you even get to the technology side of things, just in general, when it comes to building great service and product, it's talking to customers and figuring out, really understanding them deeply.
Yes.
Before you start building.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, yes. I mean, yeah. And also, I mean, it's always best if you have a few typical customers that you can, it could be a friend, it could be, someone you can ask questions during the process. So we had something very unofficially when I worked at Klarna. I don't think it's that way now because the company has grown, so it's much larger. But we had a concept we called the wives. So we talked to a few managers' wives. I think it was 2 or 3 wives, and I don't know why we choose these wives, but it was 2 or 3 persons who kind of, they weren't in the company, so they weren't colorblind by the things we saw. They came a little bit from the outside, but still they were so close, so we could bug them with questions. So identify a few of those.
I think that's it. It just reminded me of, because Warren Buffett, the investor, he used to have, when he's writing his annual shareholder letters, he says he used to imagine writing to his sisters who are really smart, but they're not in the business.
Yeah.
He's trying to communicate to people who are smart, but they don't have the specific knowledge.
Yes. Yeah.
One thing that's been kind of popular and everyone wants to, because there's been examples of it. Well, I guess already going back to PayPal with their first viral marketing, but this concept of product-led growth, building a product that's obviously really good, but also kind of building in these growth loops, if you will, or features into the product. What are your thoughts about that as it relates to, or as it stands today in 2023? Do you see any good examples of, or opportunities for creating that kind of virality, or building that kind of virality into the product and using the product to drive growth?
I think in some ways, depending on product, it's the only way of doing it. And I think that what we have seen is we have seen product-led growth a lot on the B2C side. What we're starting to see is product-led growth on the B2B side. So, for example, we have a company in Sweden called Fort Knox, which is digitalizing accounting, and etc., and basically helping small entrepreneurs. And I was in the board for a while, and I think that's an excellent example of product-led growth for B2B. They have adapted this to the B2B side. So instead of having a salesperson, maybe they have that too, but having a salesperson calling the customer and saying, hey, we have this module that you can subscribe to that helps you manage your salaries to your employees. Instead, when you see that when you see that the customer is doing actions that make you think that he or she or the company will probably manage their salaries soon or whatever, then you can, have that in the product, have that, show that you can do this if you want, have it presented in the app so that, and then you can also, I used to talk about building a next best action engine, basically knowing for your customer that you've done this. So it's best, you probably want to do this as well, So in Nordnet, for example, you have transferred money from your other bank to the Nordnet bank. You probably want to use this money, this cash, to buy stocks or funds. So then we knew that the next best action for you is to see what you want, how do you want to spend the money, or how do you want to invest the money in this case, and identify those triggers could lead to, product-led growth, but also, and then in this case, maybe more increasing the wallet size than, referring your friends, but also improving the customer experience.
Could you talk a little bit more about what you mentioned there about the kind of consumerification of B2B that we're getting used to? As consumers, we're getting used to all these great services, and we actually want that kind of convenience also when we're buying in a B2B context. And yeah, could you talk about, is there a need for all B2B companies, or a big opportunity for all these B2B companies to adapt some of the build their services in a more consumer friendly way, or what kind of trends are you seeing when it comes to B2B buying behavior and technology?
I think we've seen that. Over the years, the last 5 years, maybe 6 years, that I had one product manager who said it in a great way. She said that customers' experience on our product is the sum of all great customer experiences from other kind of products and other experiences. And I think that the more smooth and the more crisp the customer products are, the digital products you're using, and then you log in and you should do something, and you have this administrative tool and it's super cumbersome. And without mentioning any names, we have also seen that for some very large B2B systems have started to be challenged by smaller ones that don't have the same functionality. They maybe have like 2-3% of the functionality. However, those 2-3% of the functionality stands for maybe 90% of what the customer actually do with the product. Because usually these large traditional software suites, the B2B software suite, they tend to have, tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of features, but they aren't really optimized for the general flow. And then, you need to educate new employees. It's, and then comes in a competitor, typically much more cheaper. You can only do maybe a few things, but you can do that really well. It's easier to onboard, and then you tend to go to that newer kind of product. So I think that we have already started to see it, at least 5, 6, 7 years ago, perhaps even. But I think that it's now we're starting to I think now the bigger companies start to see the effects of it. In the beginning, it takes a while until the competition comes along, catches up. Yeah. And
now you're seeing that the real impact, loss of business if you're not able to keep up.
Yeah.
Switching gears a little bit, I think most of our listeners are kind of in the opposite. They've had an opposite kind of experience from you in that they are business or marketing or sales people who have been kind of forced to learn and to use technology because it's everywhere now. You can't do anything without it, obviously. So I'd be interested to kind of talk a little bit about that. So just for example, if you're a business leader, you're some kind of decision maker in a company today, and you're not from a traditional or not from any technology background, and you're hearing all these news now there's AI, but before that there's been all these changes in technology and programming languages and lots of words and abbreviations that you don't understand. So what would be your advice to that person of like, how should they be thinking about, first of all, what kind of digital or technical competence do they need, and how do they actually gain that and stay kind of up to date with all the changes without becoming overwhelmed?
What they need is, they don't need to be on top of everything, but I mean, they need to make sure that their company is following the evolution of things. So I would recommend that a person to recruit a great CTO that can filter and can all this new technology, and also help them. And also, when it comes to technology, you need to understand that it's that the mapping of technology as a solution to a problem that makes it interesting for the leader of the company. I think that, and what I've seen a lot of companies doing as a mistake is everyone spoke about doing something with blockchain a couple of years ago, and I talked to a CEO, and he said, "Oh, we need to do a blockchain project. Can you help us?" And I was like, "Why?" And he said, "But because we need to blah blah blah." I said, "Okay, but what's the problem you aim to solve?" And of course, if you're a big bank, then maybe you can afford to have a research team doing kind of nonsense stuff and just for a little bit for fun. But I think you need to understand the technology. What kind of problems can you solve with this technology, to be able to see, what is this a tool that we need in our toolbox to build great services to our customers, products and services to our customers, or is it something we don't need right now? And that's it. So having a great CTO that can help you identify, these are the problems that this kind of technology is solving, then you can take the decision, is this really something we need to invest in right now or not? I think blockchain is one example. Everyone was trying to do something, and also everyone was doing, now AI is coming to another level, but I mean, like 2016, 2015, everyone was talking about AI, and they were going to do something with AI. And, and most people didn't even understand what it was at the time, it was just way too early for many of these companies to start with the projects that they actually started with that didn't lead up to anything.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, to always have a business case in mind before you start adapting. Because you could spend, obviously, there's so much happening. You could spend all your time just trying to use different technologies. Would you be fair to say that every company, also like these let's say it could be a plumbing company or a restaurant or whatever it is, all these non-tech companies, given if they're a certain size, they need a CTO in their management team. Would you say that's true?
No, not necessarily. But I mean, if you're a restaurant, for example, actually, I was working at the restaurant when I was like 19 or something, and I was the CTO of that restaurant. So I helped them with, this was when computer was so early, and they had this very old computer system to do menus in. But that said, I think that they don't necessarily need a CTO. Or it depends. If you have like a small restaurant, then definitely not. But if you have like maybe McDonald's, of course, need something like that. Then you have digital solutions, and you're also, digital solutions can support the business in another case than in a smaller restaurant. But I'd say that it kind of depends. You talked about the plumber, etc. understanding how technology can help you improve your processes and reduce costs in some cases. That's of course essential, but do you need that in the management team, or could you maybe have a consultant for a few months that are doing, that are supporting you? Might be a bit more cost efficient way of doing it, because maybe then if you're a non-tech company, but you might need digital solutions to help you, then it might be, you will most probably leverage from acquiring a system instead of building it yourself. And then you basically need like a plumber or like someone that is connecting the different system and putting them together. And that is a little bit of one-off solution. Of course, you maybe need to revise it. So I'd say that no, I don't think everyone needs CTO. I think maybe in many cases it's better to take in consultants and maybe have a technical advisor and invite and have them support the business, but not on full time. If you're not McDonald's or something in that size.
Exactly. I think I remember reading somewhere you talking about kind of like the implications of, because technology is everywhere and it's changed how we do business, even if you're not a technology company. And could you talk a little bit about like the implications that has for overall business strategy? Just as an example, I think you were, I read somewhere that you talked about the importance of having a head of growth or a head of growth instead of just traditional CMO.
Yeah.
So how do you think about like, what are some old ways that companies are organized right now that are not specifically technology related, but because of technology, they should probably update their kind of model?
Yeah, I just, I talked to an old colleague of mine earlier today that is working in one of the big banks. I shouldn't mention which one, and they had a problem that the CMO wanted to put all their money, the marketing budget, on TV commercials. Typically who's watching TV? Is that where the audience is right now? I don't know. And we were speaking about that, and the difference between like a head of growth kind of person or chief growth and marketing, traditional marketing. Of course, it's basically the same thing, but I think that the marketing role has changed significantly the last 5-10 years, and the need of adapting in that area is extremely large. I've heard that, I don't know if it's true, but that the growth team at IKEA had been, starting off this. I don't know if you've seen this on TikTok and other social media channels. They have done this, starting off with this IKEA hack challenge where they go and grab things from IKEA and they build something out of it. And the rumor says that they started it by, a little bit under the ground, and then made a movement out of it. And also heard that, the Barbie movie wouldn't be as a big success if they hadn't had this growth hacking before. So I think that the digital part of the company traditionally have been that maybe product development, maybe tech, whatever it could be, whereas marketing might have been falling a bit behind. But that is where the big difference for the company could be. So as a marketeer, I would really, then it's getting up to, it's getting up to speed with kind of to be an expert in growth, then you don't need to be an expert in technology per se. It's more which kind of systems is used. Which social channels are people using right now? Which target group is on these different sites? You need to be a bit more KPI driven than before, and need to understand kind of our target group is basically hanging, they are most on Twitter, or they're on Snapchat, or whatever the target audience is, and maybe also what kind of messages do they want to have when they're sitting on Twitter versus when they're sitting on TikTok or whatever. So so you need to understand both the target audience, where they are, and what they are doing on this channel that they're on. I mean, what are they? What are they? What can they consume? What would they want to consume in that area? But I think that also identifying, so that's one thing, where the customer is, but then also understanding where the customer needs your product. And I think that, so for example, Easy Park, that I've been in the board in for several years, it's still one of the most effective things is still the sign on the street, because you're sitting in your car. As I said, you're sitting in your car, you're taking up your phone, you're not watching TikTok. You want to park, so you look around, and there's a sign. Oh, Easy Park is here. I have that app, and then you open. So it's very much of. It's not necessarily that everything has to be a cool TikTok video. That's definitely not the case. Then you need to understand where the customer are, and when the customer needs your product, and make sure that you're on top of mind then.
I feel like a lot of these things you can kind of learn, or these insights, you can get these insights just by trying to think like customers, putting yourself in their shoes, and
yes,
and thinking also as you do, as we all do as consumers, like, what do I like? What do I want? Where do I spend my time?
Yeah.
What kind of, So it doesn't have to be this very complicated, esoteric kind of approach.
Exactly. And I think that when I worked at Klarna, I had a great chief product officer. That was my manager. His name is David Falk. And he said, you always have to use the product you're building. And we were at the time building a payment solution for this Chinese shopping, Wish. I don't know if it exists anymore, but and it was completely addicting. And, I was ordering so much crap. And then I'm just testing our payment solution. And it was, my kids were like, you need to stop buying this, just plastic things and, clothes that were, looking super weird. And but I think that is also the key, that you need to be a user of your own product.
Right.
You need to get higher in your own supply in the world of products, I'd say. You need to, if you work at Nordnet, for example, you need to do trading. You need to make sure that you are using it and understanding, really feel what the customer feels.
Totally. We're almost out of time. So one kind of last question is, what are you excited about when it comes to kind of the intersection between technology and business? Are there any areas, any opportunities that you're particularly paying attention to?
Tricky question. I think that for me, what kind of triggers me to go, when I go and think about, things you could do in it's fixing these small things that solves a lot of problems for everyone. So I think that's finding something that is or making something a little bit easier. If you see at all the kind of the unicorns, or now, a few years, every company became a unicorn because valuation went up so high. But if you see at the most successful companies in some areas, like Klarna, for example, and a bunch of others, and Netflix, and you could see that the difference between them, they weren't the first ones, but they made something more easy. So, and I think that is what triggers me, and that is also what, if an Uber, for example, you could order a cab. I think even, in Sweden at least, there were already an app to get a cab, but it was, impossible to use it. But it was there. But I think that everyone that succeeded, that have made this, especially the one that made a really, big bang success, they made something that already existed much more easy. And so that's maybe my long answer to a short question, but maybe that is what excites me to see what can be made easier, because basically that's where the money is.
I like that. I think that's a really good kind of framework or way of identifying opportunities, because ultimately, I think especially now, people really pay a high premium on, we value convenience,
yes,
and ease of use. And
yes,
if you can do it easier than someone, then customers are likely to get
yeah,
to.
yeah.
What are the best way, because you're doing a lot of things, what are the best way for people who want to follow kind of what you're up to? Is it LinkedIn, or are you active on anywhere else?
I think on LinkedIn, if it's business wise, I'm also on Instagram, but there's just picture of my dogs, so that's not so much to follow. But I think that LinkedIn is the best place. I'm not super active anywhere, to be honest, but
okay. Well, we'll put the LinkedIn link in the description there for people who want to follow you, and the people who like the dog pictures can go to Instagram.
yeah.
Thank you, Tuva, so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Pleasure to talk to you. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening. You can find all episodes of The Growth Pod on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts.